the University of Utrecht at the Netherlands. And all know Roberta's work. She's full professor at Utrecht University, and she's involved in many, many interest topics such as language change, contact, heritage language, Italo-Romance with variation, C construction, personal construction in general, and the syntax phonology interface, among other topics. She's also a very, very active person. She's running many projects. One of them is related to one of the topics we favor in the ECC, which is contact and heritage languages. So that's one of the main reasons we invite her to tell us something about this beautiful project they are running there. She also is a very, very active editor in open press, like Open Generative Syntax Collection. She's also the main editor of the important Isoglot journal, Isoglots. And she's also the president of Going Roman. And then if you go to where it says publications or research, you are not going to end reading all the publications because it's endless. She has published in more or less all the most important journals. So it's clearly one of our leading figures in the generative field. So it's super, super pleasure to have you, in addition of being a super great friend. So we are super happy. Gracias, mille, cara. Okay, so you have more or less 1 hour, 20 for question and probably 40 or 45 for presentation, as you like, okay? I will try to moderate. Gracias.
Gracias. Gracias a todos, gracias. Lo siento no poder estar allí, ya lo dice, pero many thanks for this invitation. I'm very grateful, especially because it comes from friends. So very happy about it. I'll do my best to tell you something about the project, but I've presented the project many times. So I thought I will present some new ideas based on this project. And the ideas that I'm developing right now are about the borders between structure and cognition. What I want to tell you about is what is the so-called third factor. Can you see me?
Yes.
I see nothing. So if you can see me, I'm happy.
Yes,
I'm
we
seeing
can see you and we can read you.
Perfect. Okay, third factor. So what is this third factor? I'll tell you something about it because most of the data come from Argentina. So I'm very happy and pleased to be able to discuss this with you. So third factor first. You all know that after Chomsky's paper, third factor is about the language attainment, final language attainment. So there's the postulation of a UG, universal grammar, which is largely debated, and I'm not going to talk about it. Then there is the primary linguistic data that everybody needs to learn a language, and then there are principles that are not specific to the faculty of language, which is everything else. So the problem is, like for everything that Chomsky writes, it is not very clear what these principles non-specific to the faculty of language are. So everybody puts something in there. So we have some proposals for that. What Chomsky says is that these principles are basically principles of data analysis that might be used in language acquisition and other domains, principles of structural architecture, and developmental constraints. So we will think about what I will tell you about today in this joint work with Silvia Terengi, by the way. I will tell you something about the cognitive part of language attainment and what heritage languages can tell us about this sort of attainment, what the contribution is of cognition. Now, normally, the approach to this kind of study, the psycholinguistic approach, which is very, very commonly used, is all about this. They say, well, there's no need for this. The problem there is that they do not really consider structure at all. So they go directly for the cognitive part, everything else. There's no UG, there's nothing else. And what I would like to do is do a little bit of hygiene of the field. So let's see what is structural mapping and what is not, what is really something more cognitive. So we will tell you, we will try to discuss. I'll give you more problems than solutions, actually, but I'll try to do my best to convince you that that at least two viable third factor principles, so general principles that belong to cognition, but not specific to language. So basically, the idea is this third factor. What is it? It is something that contributes to your language attainment, to your language learning, but it is not just language. It is also shared with other cognitive factors. And this is what I want to tell you. I want to propose two of them, anchoring and monotonicity. What I will not discuss, not because they are not relevant, but because I have nothing to say about them in this talk specifically, is the social linguistic constraints and the cultural constraints that are also important. And we know that. But these are not about this. These are really about more cognition, so more psychological factors. These two factors that I'd like to propose are both active in other domains of cognition. But in particular, I think that heritage languages help severing them out from what is basically structural mapping and what is really just general cognition that drives language change in contact. And this is behind, so this is more like the roadmap. First of all, I'll tell you, I've already told about this third factor. I'll tell you about microcontact, which is the project that I directed until a couple of years back, and especially the part on Argentina, which is very telling. Then I'll tell you a little bit about anchoring, and then I'll tell you about monotonicity, which is mainly joint work with Silvia Tereni. Okay, let's go to anchoring and topicality. Oh, let's go to microcontact first. Sorry, I did the animation wrong. If something stops, just tell me because I cannot see you. If there's a problem, just interrupt and I'll stop. So the idea of the project was, how do you understand what is proper, what is the result of basically general cognition? What is the result of what we would do anyway, even in the absence of another language, and what is the result of language contact? So if you see change in a language, is this contact induced, or is it just a result of cognition? It is spontaneous. How do you find it out? Well, if you take a grammar in isolation or a language diet, that's not going to be enough. You're going to have you can never tell if change is due to is spontaneous or it is due to contact. So you have to take the same grammar, the same factor, and put it in contact with several grammars that are basically identical within a domain to the grammar that you are considering. Say grammar A, you put it in contact with several other grammars that have just a very different tiny value for one feature. And then you check what happens to this feature. Does this feature develop in the direction of these grammars, of grammar B, C, D, and E? In that case, well, grammar A. If that's the case, then it is clearly contact, the result of contact. If, however, you see that this feature evolves in the same direction, independently of the languages with which it is in contact, then it is more likely to be the result of spontaneous change. And actually, we also checked the development of this feature in isolation. Now, isolation is a big thing. There's no such thing as an isolated language. Yeah, maybe Sardinian was isolated for a long time, Icelandic, but there's no isolation. But more or less in long time spans, you can say that a language has been rather isolated at least some features. So that's the basic principles. What we did is we took some Italo-Romance languages and we went to check what happened to them in other places that were far enough. I can tell you about this in the question time if you want, but I don't want to spend so much time on this. Basically, what happened to these languages, Veneto, Piedmontese, Neapolitan, Abruzzese, these are all languages that derive from Latin. They're all spoken in Italy, but they're not Italian. And in other countries where they speak Romance languages, in Quebec, in Argentina, in Brazil, in Italy, because they started also being bilinguals in Italy. Before, when these immigrants left around the 60s, there were many monolingual dialectal speakers of these varieties, but not anymore. And also we took English just as a control language. Okay. So basically, this is the team of the people we worked on this project for a while. And this is what we did. Each of us was responsible for some parts of the world, let's say. If you want to know more, there's also an interactive atlas, and there's much more to know. We only interviewed 74 speakers in Argentina. I say only because the second and bigger fieldwork was scheduled for spring 2020 when COVID started. So we had to do with what we could with one fieldwork. But this is an ongoing research. So if any of you is interested, just contact me. There's an atlas for data crowdsourcing. This is also open source, of course, so you can take it, use it, modify it. You just contact me. You have the QR codes there. Okay, forget about this now. We go into the problem that we want to discuss today, which is third factor and anchoring, and specifically anchoring and topicality. Now, topicality is, okay, this is not going, okay. Topic and comment is a very old concept. You know, you have the topic and you want to say something about it. We have attestation about topic and my thinking, that's what I'm thinking about, and which is my psychological subject and what I'm thinking about it. So this is from 1869. And since then, there's been 1,000 different definitions of topic and comment, old and new, theme and dream. So we cannot go into that because it's too much. We will just think about the division between what is known and what I want to say about it. So more or less old and new information, you can think of that, or topic and comment. What is important is that topic is something which we already know, or that has already been expressed in the discourse previously. This is really important. Now, topics seem to be universal. It seems to be the case. There's been several studies that show that topics are really universals in language. In every language, you find this structure. You have a topic and then you talk about them. So you say, well, the first conclusion you would say is, okay, then it is UG. But no, we don't want to go so fast, because actually we want to think about what does it mean that they're general, that they're universal, and also not everything that is universal is UG, of course. So are they needed for communication? Well, it doesn't look like it. If you look at the theories of topicality, etc., you don't really need a notion of topic, because normally what you do is you update the state of information. So you have several possible worlds, and what you do when you take a topic is you restrict all possible worlds to a subset of them. You have update of information. You have several different discourse representation theory by Hans Kamp, for instance, Stalker. You have several of them. They don't really need a topic. Animals, if you want to know about animals, apparently also don't have topic comments. They have petty sentences, structures, if they have anything. So is topic comment universal? It seems so, meaning it is in every language. But if it is universal, is it UG? Well, no, because we should think of topicality as a sort of anchoring, as a sort of something that is linked to what? It's a sort of, especially in continuation topic and all the new, is something that, okay, you anchor, you fix what you already know, and then you start predicating something about it. Now, anchoring is very common in other cognitive functions. For instance, normally when speakers need to make order among conflicting inputs, they start systematizing from the anchors, and we studied it and worked on this for heritage languages in a lot of previous studies. But in general, topicality and indexicality are kinds of anchoring mechanisms. In cognition, there's the anchoring bias, whereby if you mention something, whatever you say after it, the thinker, the person, is going to be bound to think about that anchor. You cannot not think about it. And this has been found by psychologists in many years ago. If you mention an elephant, people will not be able to do any computation without considering an elephant. In directionality, we of course use anchoring to here and there, to direction, to the north, etc. Many languages also encode this in their system. So anchoring is not something exclusive to language. Now, if you think of topic as anchors, as fixing something that I want to talk about, well, this becomes immediately very general, but it is a general cognitive. So it is a perfect candidate, I think, for third factor. Let's examine differential object marking, which is your stuff, not mine. I will tell you something about differential object marking. Possibly you already know all this, but just if you think about it within this viewpoint, perhaps this can tell you something. First of all, differential object marking in heritage. So you know everything about heritage, but by heritage here, I mean really a language spoken in a minority context where the majority speaks something else. Usually, so what we think about here is the immigrant children. So the first generation is kind of heritage, but it is like first generation, it's more émigré, and then their children. This is more the kind of profile I have in mind. So in heritage languages, heritage Spanish in the United States, it has been found, many, not all, but many have found that differential object marking, which you know what that is, but anyway, it is the marking of the object when it is animate or definite, or if you are Argentinian, just because you're an object, more or less, you mark it with this marker A. This is an example from Sicilian. Talia a su peschereccio. Watch this child. You cannot say watch this, so you have to say watch at this child. Okay, now, in contact with English, it has been found that the DOM disappears or weakens, so you don't really mark this. Now, what we found in micro contact, which is in our research that I just told you, is, for instance, that Neapolitan and others, they didn't lose differential object marking. In fact, they reinforced it. Now you say, well, of course, I mean, they were in Argentina. Well, no, because we found the same in Quebec and in Brazil. Also, we found that varieties that in Italy do not have it, because only in the south is this, do you have this. So Sicilian is in the south. Only in the south of Italy you have differential object marking. Some northern Italian varieties started developing differential object marking, which is a bit of a strange thing to do in contact. You don't expect that. So we first thought, okay, it's wrong. We did something wrong because our results are so much in conflict with what has been said about contact. But in fact, oh, by the way, I put this I don't know if you see this, but I put this references because everybody, when they talk about differential object marking, they only quote Bosson. Okay, because that's his name, so that he invented it, but prepositional accusative has been attested and studied in the Romance literature since 1874, please. So it wasn't Bosson who found out this phenomenon. Now, sorry, just to say, because I mean, Romance people had thought about it. Now, because it's so pervasive, we found exactly the same in New York. This is what I wanted to tell you. We replicated Montrule's result perfectly. So here you have examples of Southern Italian communities that do not, where you see the null set, they just omit the differential object marker where you would expect it to be in Italy. In the corresponding varieties in Italy, you would have that. Salute questo qua, that's not fine. You would have a questo qua. So in contact with English, you do see weakening. But actually, in microcontact and diachronically, differential object marking tends to emerge. First, this is an example of emergence of differential object marking in Old Neapolitan, and you can see the difference between an object in situ. I don't know if you can see the pointer, but you see here mene, this is me. So I want, you want to have me die, and since me is in situ, you don't have a marker. But if you dislocate it, if you topicalize, if you move it out, then you have suddenly the marker. So topic is the prototypical place for emergence of differential object marker. Now, this is not just for Romance. This has been widely attested in over 100 languages. Gaiemolo, it is really topics. When you want to mark topics, you add a differential object marker for some reason. I will not go into the nature because you guys know much more than me about that. But the point is, this is a typical context in which you have differential object marking emerging. Now, Italian doesn't have it. Standard Italian doesn't have it, except everybody says a me when you topicalize. So teachers at school keep telling us you shouldn't say a me, which is a me in Spanish. You should say a me, but everybody says that. That's why they say you shouldn't, because there's no other way to topicalize a first and second person pronoun than adding a marker. So in spoken Italian, you have the same. In topic position, you have this anchoring, this topicality marker. Now, heritage languages are particularly interesting because Friulian is a northern Italian variety, a Reto-Romance variety, that doesn't have different. So the classical Friulian doesn't even have like Italian. This one. More modern Friulian has it because possibly of contact with Italian, but differential object marking is not found in Friulian. Now, in Argentina, we find it all over the place. You see here because that a me, the cold, doesn't help me. Or at a singer yesterday, I kissed one. So this is a dissertation. There's a lot of data by Luana Sorgini, but actually the point and the generalization is you do have emergent differential object marking. So homeland Friulian, as you see, all DPs just have 0%. And here, this is a translation task. We did many elicitation tasks. All grammars say that Friulians just frown. They don't have that. In pronouns, it's a bit like Italian, especially for younger Friulians. Now, heritage Friulian, as you can see, you have differential object marking even in C2, but the big majority, 95%, is in topic position. So 95% of the topics, they put the differential object marker. So it is really very widespread in heritage Friulian spoken in Argentina. Now, and here, this is the same. You have animacy, definiteness, indefinite. You have it all over the place. Humans and also indefinites. Now, you would say, well, of course, because this is Rio Platense. Rio Platense has extended differential object marking. These are examples by Di Tullio, but Andres has shown the same. Andres Saab, of course. So you say the book of geometry, al libro de geometria. This is really very strange, but in fact, even if it is an inanimate and it is a definite, that's enough, but you don't even need definiteness. Now, you would say, okay, that's because of contact with Rio Platense, and the question now is the original question. How much is this is due to structural mapping? So it is really a purely grammatical issue, and how much is it cognitive? Now, purely grammatical structural mapping, well, you would say with Rio Platense, it's like this, but in Rio Platense or in Argentinian Spanish, according to what Andres says, so take it out with him if you don't believe me, you do not have differential object marking with existential or possessive tener. So you don't say Juan tiene a un hermano. That's usually not accepted. And so in this case, even if you have a human, etc., you don't find the a marking. But if you have a second level predicate, you have a stage level predicate, then Juan tiene a un hermano enfermo, then you suddenly need the a. ECM has the a. Obligatory control has the a. So it is found all over the place, but interestingly not with existential tener. And you have it, tiene un hermano enfermo. Now, guess what? You find these a in Friulian, specifically in these constructions. So it is not enough to say, so when you think about structural mapping, you think, okay, the structure is the same, word order is the same, that's enough. Now, what I would like to say is, no, you have to take syntax seriously and go and check every construction against every other construction. And you see that there is a certain mismatch between what you find in Friulian, heritage Friulian, and what you find in Argentinian Spanish. So it cannot be a direct mapping only. It can be a structural fact, but it can also not be. So in existential tener, you do have, for instance, do in Argentina, whereas you have less for secondary predicate, which is the reverse for Friulian. Now, Luana went and checked all possible constructions, and it is really, it looks a bit like structural mapping, but it doesn't need to be. It is mostly also differential object marking is found in those very few contexts in which you don't really find it in Argentinian Spanish. Now, then structural mapping is not a thing. Well, not so fast. Also, that is not to be concluded immediately. So we took a look at this language. This language is called Sarnami. This is an Indo-Aryan language, which is spoken in Suriname. Suriname is a former colony of the Netherlands. And in Suriname, at some point, the Dutch invited these indentured laborers from northern India, and they were speakers of all these languages that you see listed here: Bhojpuri, Awadhi, Hindi, Magadhi, etc. This is mainly Eastern Indo-Aryan. They got all together and they formed the Koine in Suriname. And this Koine is an Indo-Aryan Koine, which had each of these languages had differential marks. So they started speaking this Koine, which is called Sarnami, and nowadays also found in the Netherlands, because many of the speakers went back to the Netherlands. Many of them speak this Koine that originally had differential object marking. What happened in Sarnami is that differential object marking got preserved in contact with Dutch, but not in contact with English, for instance. Now, why? Well, according to my student, Yuri Finke, who actually went and did a lot of field work on this Sarnami, the basic idea is Dutch has a very clean way of showing what's the topic. And that's because of verb second. So you have the first thing you say before the verb, which is V2, is the topic. So that reinforces the retainment of differential object marking. What does this suggest? This suggests that structural mapping is there. English doesn't have a clear topic position. Topicalization in English is not a thing even. So this suggests that in fact structural mapping is active. So now, what does this tell? What this tells us that there is no conclusive evidence that when we think about contact, we need to consider several things, that we cannot attribute everything to grammar, but that grammar can play a role in structural mapping. So it is not just grammar, but it is also not just cognition, it is an interaction of the two. Now, topic is very important, and it is very relevant in many other structures. For instance, in null subjects, you know that when you have null subjects, you have the so-called you drop basically the topic. And in fact, in contact, there is a famous silent problem, which has been named like that by Polinsky and Laleko and Polinsky, who say, well, in contact, you do not, languages that have prodrop don't do the prodrop. You actually say the subject explicitly. Now, if you say the subject explicitly because you want to be understood, you want to be sure that they're understanding, etc., etc. Now, what happens is that what we found, we looked at some of these Northern Italian languages that have subject litics. What we found out is that the subject litics, in contact with Argentinian Spanish, but also Brazilian Portuguese, they became full-fledged pronouns. They could be dislocated, they could be stressed, very unlike the subject litics in Northern Italian varieties. And what happens, guess what? When you had a continuation topic, we saw emergence of prodrop. So what you see in Veneto in Italy is you have the subject litic. What you see in Veneto in Brazil, in topic position is prodrop, emergent prodrop, in topic position. So prodrop could also be a way of underlying topicality. In any event, topicality is relevant there. And it is, again, continuation topic, multiplication topic, etc. So this is the dissertation of Alberto Fresson, and this is the overt expression of subjects, let's say, litics. And you can see that in heritage in Argentina, you have a drop of the expression of the subject. So basically, they don't express the subject in topic, especially in continuation topic, and also in Brazil. So topicality becomes like proves to be relevant also here. So the interim conclusion is that anchoring is at work in several cognitive domains. Anchoring is also at work in language. So it very likely also involved in language change in contact, and it is particularly visible in how it determines the output in heritage languages, but it is not always acting alone. So there is a way that we need to find, which is a sort of harmonization between pure cognitive biases and structural interaction, which is important. But in any event, we think that anchoring is a good and plausible candidate as third factor principle. Okay, now last part of the talk is something entirely different. So far, we have tried to convince you that there are some general cognitive factors that determine the output of heritage language change in contact. And of course, Tonius is there, and he can tell you much about in same context in which DOM emerges, if it emerges, or in which you have prodrop in Creoles, is exactly the same in which you see them emerging or disappearing in contact, obviously. So this is a general factor, but could it be due only to contact? Well, not necessarily, but it could be due partly to contact. Okay, now we switch gears completely, and we go and talk about another candidate, which is monotonicity. Monotonicity is usually predicated of functions. What you see here are monotonic functions. What is a monotonic function? That's a function whereby if you increase the value on x, the corresponding value on the y-axis is going to grow. You add 1 to x, and you will have one more to y. So basically, the curve increases. The decreasing function is such that if you increase the x, you decrease the y. That's decreasing. And if this continues forever or within a given interval, it's called monotonically. This continues like this. Now, you have an example here of a non-monotonic function. You increase the x and the y increases up to a certain point, then you keep increasing the x and the y immediately suddenly starts going down. So you have a non-monotonic. Non-monotonic doesn't mean monotonically decreasing. It simply means it doesn't have an order. This is all about Silvia Terengi's dissertation, by the way. Most of this work is joint work based on her dissertation and other work. Now, monotonicity is found, well, this is mathematics. So when we went to school, we had to do monotonic functions. So it's about mathematics. But also in logic, there's monotonic reasoning, whereby basically if you have a reasoning system is monotonic whenever a conclusion follows from a set of primitives, and it will still follow from the primitives plus more premises if it is monotonic. So if you add more premises, the conclusion will still follow, right? Now, we will focus today on the person domain, which is a subset relation. So the person domain, and I will try to convince you that the person, the way it is encoded in pronouns and in demonstratives, follows a monotonic bias, which also determines the direction of language change. In domains sensitive to monotonicity, monotonic computations are preferred to non-monotonic ones. This has been proven by some logicians, by Van Bentem and from other people. Let's take this for granted. It is, let's say, easier to compute monotonicity than non-monotonicity. So we think that this is a candidate monotonicity, perfect candidate as a third factor. It belongs to language in a way that I'll show you in a minute, but it also belongs to other to other parts of cognition. Okay, now, for this to work, we need to have a specific way of defining features, and the features are defined following Harbour as basically lattices on which operations apply. So in a set theoretical way, but not in the way we know merge to be set theoretical. This is more of it is more in a vectorial way, let's say. But I'll tell you in a minute. Basically, what you need to remember is that you have basic sets and you have operations, which are the plus and the minus, operating on these sets. So person categories can be divided into natural classes by virtue of their monotonicity profile, as I'll try to show you in the remaining, I think I have 10 minutes. I have, according to this, I'll try to be fast as possible. First, notations. This is Harvard's notation. It's the most unfortunate notation, but that's what we have. The author, that's I. We normally call this the speaker or the signer or but you know, when we see from now on an A, that's going to be author and not addressee. Remember, this is I, it's easier. Participant, that's pretty much like everyone else. A participant is I, the speaker, I and you, speaker and addressee, or only you. This is the set of all possible participants in a conversation. Now, there is a set on which there's a syntactic head on which you have a set. This is a set which is called pi, which contains all possible combinations of these primitives. So you have I and you have you, and you have others. And this little o means an indefinite number of others. So I and an indefinite number of others means basically the speaker or we. That's the idea. Now, this pi, look, this is the pi set. This is other, this is I, this is you, this is another other, this is yet another person, right? So this other is the third person, basically. So you can combine I and other, I and another is we. And that's an exclusive. So I and you is an inclusive we, and something like this. So all the possible combinations form this huge set, which is represented as a lattice. And basically, what do we do? These operations, plus and minus that you put, these signs that you put, plus author, minus author, these are operations, really in the sense of set theoretical operations. So now there is a conflict of ways between the mathematics as I studied it and the way Harvard defines it. But basically, plus author means if I add plus author to this set, which is pi is all the set. So the way he and Sylvia, the way they encode this, they say you have a plus author. This means that you add author to this set. That's the idea. And otherwise, normally you think you have an operation that takes author and returns and applies onto the other set. It doesn't matter. What is important is here, you have plus feature means pi, plus feature, plus that feature. Minus feature is plus minus this. Pi, all the possible combinations, the power set that's called, minus the feature. Now, what does addition do? So plus author to pi means that you add author to pi. How do you do this? Well, it's a theoretical ways. It is you add author to every component of the set, to every element of the set. So you have I and you and I, plus I. This means I plus I, which returns I, because I plus I is I plus I and you, which returns I and you. Other plus I. So the most important thing is if you add the author to other, you're going to have an author. So you're going to end up with a subset, because you will have, if you add the author, I, the speaker, to every element, including other, a third person, you're going to have, again, first person and second person. So participant and first person. Okay. Subtraction is the same, minus author. So you do like this. Now the computation takes time. You have to believe me on this. So basically, the person feature partitions these sets into smaller sets. Even if it seems that you are adding, you are actually subtracting, you are selecting a subset. Basically. Now, why is this important? These are different person paradigms. So this is I, this is first person exclusive, this is first person inclusive, this is second person, and this is a third person. Now, there are several, these are different languages. And the language we will look at and the system we will look at is the tripartite system for demonstratives only. So this close to the speaker, that close to the addressee, or that far from both. So este, ese, aquel, more or less. So we have, if you look at this without even doing any computation, you can see that plus plus, you think, well, that's monotonic. Plus minus, that's not monotonic because there's a or plus or minus minus, that's monotonic more or less intuitively, right? But now that's not what we're talking about. We want to talk about the fact that you keep the subset relation author to the result, to the output of these operations. Intuitively, basically, what I want to say, and this is a spoiler alert, and what I want to tell you is that basically categories in which you first subtract and then you add, they are dispreferred in language. So the second, the addressee-oriented form is the one that's going to disappear in contact, in isolation, everywhere. That's the final story. So why? Basically, the first, if you add author, so first of all, author is obviously a subset of participant, and it is also a subset of the power set pi. I is a subset of this. Monotonicity means preserving the subset relation. In this sense, we're talking about monotonicity. Several operations, one after the other, the subset relation remains. So now, if you add author to pi, if you add I to this whole big set, the output will be, as we said, I and you. I will still be a subset of the result after the operation. So if you take author, you add the two. Author is already a subset, is one of the elements of pi, remember. Then you add author plus author to this element of pi. Author is still going to be the subset of pi plus author. You're going to keep this monotonic at the first round. Same with participant. If you subtract author from pi, you are going to disrupt, obliterate the monotonicity, because author is a subset of pi, but author is not going to be a subset of the result of the minus operation, which is you and other. So author is not going to be there, right? So you have obliterated the monotonicity. Now, look at this. This is easy. It is easier than it looks. Author is a subset of, this is the first operation, the one that we just saw. Author is the subset of plus author applied to pi. So pi plus author. We've just seen that this is confirmed. Now, let's take a second round and let's add participant. So we have a first round of operation where you add plus author, and you have this. Now to this you apply plus participant. And the question is, will author still be a subset of this second round of operation? Well, if you first add author, then you add participant, author is still going to be a subset. I is still going to be a subset of this. So this is the way you derive in their system first person. First person is the derivation of a monotonic sequence of applications of plus operations on the power set of person. That's what I've just told you. For those of you who don't care about maths, one first person is derived monotonically.
Okay,
Third
Roberta.
person, how do you derive it? If you first apply
Roberta.
but you want to have a third person, you have to delete author.
Roberta,
So how do you do it? You delete participant. I mean, Silvia did all the possible combinations. I've given you just a subset. But if you do plus author minus participant, you're left with a third person. This is non-monotonic. I is not going to be a subset of a third person. First person is not a subset of third person. So you don't have this third person derived like this is not a good. So is this preferred in language? Now, third person, there's also another way. You first subtract the author and then you subtract also the participant. In this way, you keep, so author was not originally already not a subset of minus. Author applied to pi. The second round, if you subtract also participant, is still not going to be a subset. The subset relation is preserved. So this is a monotonic sequence, even if it is non-sub. So you have subset and subset here. You have non-subset to start with, and you keep the non-subset. So this is monotonically decreasing, and you basically have a way of deriving third person monotonically. Second person is a problem because you first delete author and you're stuck with second person, but then you have to add participant. So you first do not have so you have a non-monotonic, first minus and then plus. And this one, you have I, which is not a subset of two, of you, basically. Now, the order here is also monotonically preserved. But this is, so this is a problem also for Sylvia, but let's say that basically the idea that you first subtract and then you re-add a participant. So you first subtract the author. Once you've subtract the author, you can no longer apply it anymore. That's basically the intuition. This is basically in her system for some reason, which is very complicated, but this is non-monotonic. At least you first subtract, then you add, and you basically have a problem with second person. So second person is the most dispreferred of all the systems. Basically, you have plus and plus gives you first and you're happy, minus and minus gives you third and you're happy, minus and plus gives you second, you are not happy. So what we predict is that you do not have, so that second person is the one that's going to disappear. Now, I'll show you what happens in heritage languages. Now, basically, this is Sicilian. Sicilian has a demonstrative close to the speaker, a demonstrative close to the hearer, and a demonstrative far from both. French is se, it doesn't have a change. This one is more or less the spoken Spanish and also Argentinian Spanish. Este is close to the speaker, and ese is everything else. This and that, basically. You don't have este, ese, and aquel. So you don't have this close to the speaker, you have this division. Now, when the languages get in contact, if it was just a matter of structural mapping, you would expect overlap of these systems, basically. You would expect that Sicilian would become in contact with Spanish. You would have kistu and then kisu, let's say, meaning that. That's not what happens. This is the data elicitation. I can tell you later because we have no time. Basically, this the results. So again, what was predicted, the second person is the most non-monotonic. Changing direction, you first add, then you subtract. People are not happy, and so you have basically the most unstable system is the second person demonstratives. And what you have is the following: in contact with French, you basically do not have any of French doesn't have any distinction. You have basically a reduction of the second person. First person and second person converge, but the third person is outside. So there's absolutely no structural mapping. In contact with Spanish, we found both. We found both kiss to versus everything else, which would be compatible with Argentinian Spanish, but we also found kiss to versus third person. So first and second versus third, and this is absolutely not compatible with the structural mapping. Same in English. In English, we found actually one way and the other. What is important, and I want you to check, is that second person is always involved. So second person actually ends up collapsing either on first person or on third person, but it is not stable morphologically. This is the most unstable. And the reason why, mainly Sylvia, we think, but this is, I mean, Sylvia's work. That's what I want to say. I want to give credit to her work. She's actually showed this also for, she checked 700 languages. And the generalization is this: second person is the most unstable in demonstratives. Also, pronominal systems are a bit different because there's an interaction with number. It is always unstable. And why? Because it is a result of non-monotonic application of operations. Basically, this is prone to change. So basically, there's a bias against non-monotonic form. And what the idea is computationally, and this is true in contact, but also in isolation. So this is a true cognitive fact. Do I have to stop? I'm done. I'm finishing.
Okay.
The data show basically there's a lot of change abroad. There's a lot of variability. You heard Liliana yesterday, but basically there's a lot loss. So the non-monotonic sequence tends to be eliminated, reduced, because it is more difficult to compute. There's similar cases with dual for number. We find it all over the place. So the conclusion is monotonicity is a plausible candidate as a third factor principle because it doesn't just apply to language. It is a cognitive general law, but it does determine the output of language change. Conclusions. Anchoring and monotonicity are very relevant factors for language change. They interact with structure, they interact with morphology, but structure alone, morphology alone are not enough, but also cognition alone is not enough. Remember Sarnami. They're both active in other domains of cognition. They are really just cognitive in the sense of Chomsky. And more or less, this is what I wanted to tell you. I conclude with this quote by Chomsky that I really like. No one familiar with the field has any illusion today that the horizons of inquiry are even visible, let alone at hand in any domain. So this is just the beginning. Thank you. And if you want to contact me, if you want to talk to me, if you want to participate, you find me, you know how to find me. Thank you very much. Let me get
Roberta,
back to see
can you
you.
hear me?
Do you see me now?
Yes.
Yeah, we
Did I
see.
stop sharing?
We see you, but you don't.
I see a lot of embedded recursive.
Stop.
Yeah. Now I've stopped. Was it
So,
right?
yeah,
Was I
stop.
supposed to-
Yeah.
I see Andres, and I see Andres speaking, but I don't hear you.
Oh, ok.
That's what I was saying.
I see you, pa, 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 but I don't hear you.
No sé por qué. Está activado el micrófono. Ok.
¿Será por esto? Hola, hola. Hola, hola, hola.
No, está
Hola,
funcionando
hola.
eso.
I could hear you before and no longer.
¿Ahora me escuchas?
Wha, pa, 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 pa.
¿Y ahora?
¿Te sacamos el micrófono?
Oh, now I hear you, Andresito. I don't know why.
Okay, great.
I can
Okay,
hear you
okay.
now. Oh, I don't know
Yes,
what happened.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Something
now I
happened,
hear
but
you.
it's solved. Okay, so we have 15 minutes for questions. It was a
Sorry
great
for
talk.
going long.
We have many questions going on. So please, people. Okay, Samara, yes, come here, please.
No, no.
No, don't come here. Just talk.
Hola, Samara. Hi.
How-
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you for a very nice and insightful talk. And my question is, given some similarities between second language and heritage language, if you have any evidence from second language data in this empirical domain, for hand-on and subject lyrics, demonstrative. Thank you.
Just let me go turn on the light because I think you cannot see me. Mic here. No, I think yes. Yeah. Well, basically, heritage languages are second languages. I mean, it is just the same thing, and there's always a lot of questioning about. Always, should we just be studying second language acquisition? Now, the problem with heritage languages is that heritage speakers are bilingual, whereas normally when we think about second language acquisition, we think of subsequent. So first you learn a language, then you learn the other. The mechanisms, many mechanisms are the same. We know that, for instance, the interface principle, the interface property by After Hulk and then Antonella Sorace, the idea that whatever involves discourse is much more prone to change and much more unpredictable. What we found is actually that for features, like you see now for person, but also for other features, when it's basically 5 features, the way language changes is rather stable. Whereas if you look at whatever involves discourse, including DOM, domicality, etc., you have much more random change. That has been found also for second composition. And what they found is actually that that's the part that is more prone to attrition, because it involves, of course, interfaces. It is not just syntax, it is the CP is interfaces with discourse, with whatever you want, honorability, all sorts of things. So indeed, yes, any of these things have been looked at for non-subject. Yes, precisely this has been found, but it's the opposite of what we found for second languages as well as for heritage languages. They found that heritage speakers and second language learners that people are understanding. For second language learners, it is more difficult to keep track of of known subject, of inflection and all these things. So there is an interface with all sorts of factors, and this has been found both for heritage languages and for L2. The interesting thing is that when you are in microcontact, these things don't seem to apply. So that's what we found in our project. That in fact, given some conditions, you start omitting the subject like crazy, which is against what you would be expected. But the answer, short answer to your question is yes. There are several things and similar results, indeed. Yes.
Grazie. Questions? Carlos?
Puedes seguir.
La cámara te acompaña, Carlos.
Hi, Roberta. What
Ciao.
Yo te sigo.
Stay with the camera. And thanks for the talk. It was amazing. I have a question about the link you presented about anchoring and DOM marking. And I was wondering about what are the limits of this link, right? Because DOM marking has a lot of connections in the grammar of languages. I'm thinking about, well, it's syncretic with dating, for instance, or it has connections with criticality and stuff. Is anchoring connected also to these notions, or is it restricted to DOM specifically? Thank you.
Caro, you asked the question of all questions, because what the relation between topicality, topic marking, and the fact that you mark the objects and not the subjects, but why do you always do it with the objects? Some people say that this is just case, some people say it's topic, some people say it's both. Well, one thing is I can tell you two ideas, but I'm not completely sure because there's a lot of debate. One thing is that you mark the objects normally. I mean, DOM, and this is something that Liliana also showed, often also corresponds with clitic doubling, and there's also Keynes generalization, etc. So it is some sort of strategy to keep the long distance relationship. So one idea I had about heritage, not the rest, is that when you topicalize an object, you get really out of the phasal domain at least. Whereas when you topicalize a subject, you are basically adjacent. So you need some way of keeping track of the fact that you are having a long distance dependency, which is very difficult to compute for heritage language speakers because they have less input than the norm. So this could be a basic principle, would be anchoring in the sense of you are kind of establishing a long distance relationship, which is a rather different thing than saying topicality. Now, dative. Rita Manzini thinks that datives are underlying locatives. So you're basically using datives for some sort of locational relation. And in this case, I would say with a big leap of faith, you could say, well, in the topic, why do you always or often, not always, not in Romanian, but in most languages you have the same marker. for location, for locality, and for DOM. Possibly there is a way of linking, so you could extend this to location. Now that there is something underlyingly cognitive in there is something that I thought, but I'm not completely sure I'm right about that. But it is something very strange. So Marcia Molinsky studied differential object marking in Russian heritage speakers in the United States, and what she found is that they dropped the DOM. So now Russian has differential object marking only for the masculine singular. So there is only one marker, but the marker of the DOM in Russian masculine singular animate is A. It's not the same as the dative. So normally the dative masculine singular is U, and the object is A if it is animate. The heritage speakers drop it. But what they do is they take this A marking and they use it as the dative of the double object construction, which they don't use the normal dative, which they have, the U, they use the A. Why do they take the DOM marker for the dative? So this tells me there's something cognitive there. Now, from there to saying, well, this could be a general cognitive strategy, well, that would be a bit, I mean, I think we need 2,000 years and some serious neuroscience to know that. But, Manzini says it's location. She shows that dative is actually reused from the DOM. So these things are connected at a deeper level than we think. It is not just moving to the K head and you check it, you're happy. That's not enough. But I cannot tell you more than this. I'm afraid. You ask Andres. He knows more.
Andres, here. I have a follow-up, sorry, the last one because we are out of time. But I have the following question. So in Spanish, in my Spanish, in Rio Platense Spanish, something that Pablo Droyevsky really have shown is that DOM is not connected to topicality as a clear link. As for instance, we have contrastive focus, informational focus. You can associate DOM to any type of information structure property, from informational focus to topic, whatever.
Yeah.
And the relevant question would be whether in the contact in the heritage case, the sets of flavors that the DOM uses are connected most prominently to topicality than to the others one, right?
Yeah, they are.
Okay. Then this is a good point. I mean, it's a good indication that you are on track, right?
So first of all, yes, I know Pablo's work and yours, etc. So indeed, but it seems to me that DOM in Rio Platense has really generalized with some exceptions. So indeed, it is important. So what I mean, I was fast in there and it wasn't very visible. I don't know if I can find it, but the topic is really predominantly the place where you find it. So in Friulian, but also in other, because I showed you only Friulian, but I showed you in Veneto, that's the same. Well, in Veneto, you don't really have it much because of other reasons that I cannot tell you. Takes long, but also in varieties that have originally DOM, like Abruzzese, mine, we only have it with first and second person pronouns. I don't have it with third person. It is extended, but the place you find it is really predominantly the first place. It's the topic place, but then it extends. Now, the interesting thing is that we found this also in contact with Brazilian Portuguese and French, where there's no possible structural mapping. I mean, I think Brazilian Portuguese might have had some residue I found with God that you use DOM, but I don't really know. But there's really not there, and French doesn't have it at all. Italian doesn't have it, only in this. So it is really, it seems that this is what you see is in heritage languages, it is true that it is lost, but it is lost in situ. So it is the case marking that gets lost, and it is reintroduced with the mechanism that actually Teresa Buberauer often talks about, the recycling entering from the edge. It is reintroduced on the left periphery. And of course, if you have a language like Rio Platense Spanish, which is so massively aiming for the expansion, you get reinforced. But it is, you know, that's the idea. So that's a good point, and thanks for asking, because indeed, that's a good question.
So we don't have more time because we are out of time. Roberta, it was a super awesome talk. We're super happy. Thanks a lot for being there. And we hope to have you here in presence.
Yes, I hope that more than you, believe me.
Ciao, Clara.
Muchas gracias. Chao. Bye.
Bye, Roberta.
Bueno, entonces, un abrazo.